And now the next chapter. The Silver Bowl. I'm going to try not to fall asleep reading this. I'm a little sleepy. I want a child from you, do you hear? What's the matter with you? I want a child, I tell you. It was these words of Will Zoyland, flung out angrily at her as he jumped in his car to drive to Mark Court early on Sunday afternoon. They kept ringing in the ears of Nell as she moved around White Lake Castle Cottage, cleaning and tidying things up on Easter Monday. Oh, we're still around Easter, huh? What made him think of that just now? She said to herself. He can't read a person's thoughts. He can't know about it. How could he? Oh, no. The truth was that the girl was pretty sure, although not absolutely sure, that Sam's child had already begun its obscure embryonic life within her. Ooh. She had begged him to come out to see her today, knowing that the popular holiday would keep Will safe at Wookey Hole. She had been longing with a great longing, to tell Sam what she hoped for. Yes, it says she had been longing with a great longing. That's what it says. I'm just reading what it says. But now she was teased by this tormenting question. Should she tell him what Will had said? And should she raise the agitating point whether or not it was best to pretend to Will that this child, if it did really come, was his child? Oh, if only Sam could gather up the spirit and resolution to carry her off, to find work to do, so that he could support her and their child, somewhere, anywhere, so it was far from Glastonbury. Let Will do what he liked then. Divorce her, refuse to divorce her. What did she care, as long as Sam and she were together? She'd been living in one long, delicious trance since that night. Sam had come out only once to see her since, and on that occasion had seemed absorbed in his own thoughts. But he had been gentle and sweet to her, and she had felt so happy, pressing him against her, holding him, hugging him tight and fast, with this thrilling chance of all chances between them, that she had not inquisitioned him or persecuted him with her problem. But this angry challenge of Will flung out at her after she had managed to evade any serious lovemaking had broken up her radiant dream. Troubled and anxious and full of nameless fears, she went about her work this morning. She had risen early, after walking before dawn, from a disturbed sleep. A sleep in which she dreamed that it really was Will's child, and not Sam's at all, that had just begun its mysterious life process within her. And her mental agitation had been increasing rather than diminished by the nature of the day as it grew light. It was absolutely still after the wind of the previous 24 hours, but it was gray and damp, clouds in the sky, heavy mists clinging to the meadows. It looks as if it were going to prove a very gloomy, if not a disastrously wet, bank holiday. Nell was startled at the havoc that great wind had done among her wild plants, so carefully tended. Her little grass lawn, sloping down to the river bank, was strewn with twigs and leaves from trees quite far away, and some brick tiles, too, had been blown from the roof. The dead stillness of the air after such a wind hurricane was itself disturbing. The day was one of those days when human beings who have anything in their minds, anything in their consciousness, cannot refrain from a certain listening. It was a day when guilty people could hear their hearts beating, hear their clocks ticking, hear the faint dripping into sink or barrel of the least drop of water from tap or pipe. Nell washed up her breakfast things more rapidly than usual. She made her bed and tidied her bedroom quicker than she was wont to do. She dusted her parlor. She went down on her knees and washed, with soap and water, the checkered linoleum on her kitchen floor. All the time she was doing these things, she would glance at the window to see if Sam's figure were approaching and then draw her eyes hurriedly away from the menacing inertness of the weather outside. But below her trouble over Will's face, fierce words, so fatally well-timed, and below the preoccupation of her work and her longing for her lover to come, there kept drumming and humming in her deeper ears a low refrain of exultation. "It's begun! It's begun! To me, myself, and not another, it has happened. My true love's child inside me, safe inside me, and going to grow and grow and grow!" She sat down on the sofa couch and picked up a booklet, bound in paper, that lay there. It was a Marxian pamphlet left by her brother Dave. Stubbornly, she tried to concentrate her thoughts upon the formidable argument this little work unfolded. "Children," she read, "are wards of the state, even in their mother's womb. Motherhood is an occupation as dangerous, as necessary, as important to society as to be a peasant, a factory worker, a miner. Religious marriage is a bourgeoisie superstition grossly intermingled with the historic iniquity of private property. No human creature has a right to claim possession of the person or another. Children are the creation of nature, but their well-being is the responsibility of the state. When the life of the fetus is..." As Nell read these words, a sudden panic seized her. Something leapt up from these compact, official, emphatic sentences that was much more formidable than their obvious meaning. Sitting there in her bright, crocus yellow spring dress, covered with a loose, light green overall, she suddenly began to shiver from head to foot. Her teeth began to chatter, and she threw on her hands and up her hands and pressed them against her ears, as if she heard the marching feet of an army of executioners. She had not really understood at all the impact of what she read, but something about the tone of it, its air of irreversible and doom-like finality, filled her with a blind terror. Her teeth chattered so loudly that she clasped her hands to her mouth. Her shivering made the skirt of her crocus yellow gown stir faintly, like the underwing of the moth that boys call yellow underwing when the wind catches it. She got a vision of herself as being caught in a long, fatal process of nature from which there was no outlet, no possible escape. She felt the intimate quality of her own private personality now. She felt the Nell she had lived with all her grown-up life, the Nell with the soft hair, the passionate mouth, the full breasts, the Nell with the mania for planting wild flowers in a flower garden, the Nell who loved scrubbing but hated cooking, the Nell who used to endure a husband and now idolized a lover, the Nell who loathed reading and liked using her needle, the Nell who preferred dreaming by open windows to talking by glowing hearts, the Nell who always found oranges so sweet and marmalade so bitter. And it seemed to her now, as she began crumpling in her fingers the odious pamphlet written by men who knew nothing about women, that this Nell, who was so dear to her, whose every expression in the mirror she knew so well, this Nell whose teeth she cleaned, whose hair she brushed, whose little ways were her ways, was no longer hers, no longer her private possession. This soft body, every part of it which held secret nerves of its own, was now bought and sold. Yes, it was handed over, bound and fettered, to a long inescapable doom that had been prepared millions of years ago, not from the Nell she knew, but for females in general, a doom that must needs lead her on, deeper and deeper, into the raw, heavy, monstrous, impersonal mire of brutal creation. She crumpled the unlucky pamphlet into a tight ball of paper and tossed it into the fire. She felt better after she had done this, but she still felt as if it were more than she could bear to hear any man, even Sam, laying down rules for human life. Blind and dumb and inarticulate, she felt something surging up within her, that, if she could only express it, would blow all the institutions in the world sky high. "My womb was conceived," was the burden of what she ached to cry aloud. "And I tell you this is something that has broken all your laws. It's a miracle, do you hear me? A miracle has happened. And I'm the one, not any of you murderers and starers and examiners and inspectors. I'm the one to tell the world what is the secret of life." She went into the kitchen and snatched up an orange from a bowl on her dresser. Into the top of this orange she thrust her forefinger till she had made a deep round hole. Into the hole in the orange she now pushed 1, 2, 3 small lumps of sugar, and then clutching the sticky, fragrant yellow skin tightly in her fingers, she pressed her mouth to the hole and sucked furiously. Keeping her teeth sufficiently closed so as to push back the half-melted sugar but drawing up the sweet juice into her mouth, she placed herself in front of the fire and stared down at the red coals, squeezing, sucking, swallowing. She found the warmth of the fire comforting as it reached her legs and her skin, and when the moment came for her to tear open the orange and bury her face in its sugary interior, tearing the sticky pulp from the bitter rind with her teeth, she found that her whole mood was completely changed. She threw the orange skin into the flames, then, and gathering her overall tightly around her, she moved still closer to the bars, letting the warmth extend to as much of her person as she possibly could, and snuffing up with luxurious satisfaction the smell of the burning orange skin. She began to grow impatient for Sam now. She thought of how she would kiss him when he held her in his arms. "I'll kiss his eyes," she thought. "It's nice when he shuts his eyes." And then she thought, "I love him when he works his chin up and down, when he gets worried about anything." But Sam did not come. It was 1:30 now, and she said to herself, "I ought to get myself something to eat, but I shan't do it." She put more coals on the fire and went to the couch and lay down upon it. She could see a fragment of the garden out of the window, and how dark it was, and how frighteningly hushed and still. She had an abscess in her gum above one of her back teeth, and this began to hurt her a good deal. The orange sucking must have started it. She searched for it with her tongue. She suddenly began to feel more occupied with this trifling annoyance than with Sam or her child or Zoyland, or the strange nature of the weather outside. She shut her eyes. At last, as she pressed her tongue against her aching gum, a drowsiness stole over her that almost took her consciousness away. The hurting in her mouth became a thing entirely distinct from her personality. And when her drifting thoughts reverted to the embryo life within her, that also seemed something quite outside of her and independent of her. And then before she realized what had happened, Sam had come. Before she was fully awake, he had given her a fierce, violent hug, too hard and breathless to be called tender, too brief to be called passionate. And there they were, sitting on the couch side by side, staring wildly, confusedly, and helplessly at each other. She had told him already about the child. "Are you absolutely sure?" he had murmured, and she nodded emphatically. Something in his manner had driven her to go on talking about it in a way she had never intended to do. It was a remoteness in him different from anything she had ever known. It was as if he had been clothed from head to foot in an invisible chain armor, and not only so, but had had his visor down, through which his little bewildered bare eyes gazed out at her, puzzled, ambiguous, with an obstinate film over them. Everything was so wretchedly different from what she had expected. Her thoughts as to what he would do had been very vague, but she had in her dreamy way been feeding herself with the fantastic hope that he would cry out to her at once, "Come then, my true love, nothing henceforth shall part us." But he had done nothing of the kind. And in place of anything like that from him, she had found herself explaining hurriedly that Will Zoyland would naturally think, if she acted with any kind of discretion in so delicate a manner, that the child was his. Would he? Sam had asked, as if, even then, his mind was not really grasping the significance of what she was saying. It must have been at the point that the all-unequal wave of drowsy indifference that had swept over her before he came once more had exercised its fatal numbing power, for she had seemed paralyzed as people are in dreams and unable to break through the mysterious barrier between them. She had found herself taking an almost apologetic tone about her condition, as if her lover had a right to be angry with her for it. She had found herself explaining that even if Will Zoyland were not absolutely convinced, the existence of a doubt in his mind would not make him act violently or abruptly if she did not leave his bed till everything was further advanced. It was then that Sam had said, "You are sure it is ours?" The brutality of this question had brought tears to her eyes, but she had only looked reproachfully at him and had murmured, "Of course it's ours, you're silly." But the revolting idea had crossed her mind, and as he put that point-blank question, suppose I didn't know myself which of them it was. The relief that she did know, and as far as that went, knew beyond all question that it was Sam's, held now, for her dazed intelligence, such a comfort, after that diabolically horrid idea, that she threw still further emphasis into her plausible argument that everything would go on quite naturally, and as if it were her husband's. That's Glastonbury for tonight. See you later.